He is a renowned wetland hydrologist specializing in hydrology and integrated water resources. So thank you, sir, for joining us. This national level training has got a cohort of 24 trainees from 10 states of India. As you recall, last month we had a state level trainers program, and you were here offline for a keynote address. And this is the second in the series, national level training. So the participants are waiting for your lecture. We have a total of 1 hour, including the discussion. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everybody. It has been a great pleasure to be part of this program. One thing which came to my mind from the epics is that, you know, Ganges was in flood, and the son of Ganges, Bhishmacharya, came with the arrows and put the arrows on the bosom of his mother to prevent the floods in the Ganges. And this is something which I just remembered when I came to know that some of you are interested in the rivers of this country. Now, the theme on which I'm going to speak about is on related ecosystems, healthy water, related ecosystems, and source sink management. I have selected 4 ecosystems here. One is forest ecosystem. Second is agricultural ecosystem, agricultural watersheds. The third is the urban ecosystem, and the fourth is wetland ecosystem. The former 3 are mainly sources, though they are also sinks, but the latter is mainly a sink, though it is also a source. So these are the 4 ecosystems which are incorporated in the river basins, which I have selected for detailed study. Now let's go to, before we start all these, I thought that we will have a look at what is integrated water resources management, which people were talking about in the Dublin conference. Both Dr. Douche, the chairman, and the other members were preparing the document for Rio summit. They came up with the suggestion of integrated water resources management, which is a process for sustainable development, allocation, and monitoring of water use, considering social, economic, environmental, and institutional objectives. If you look at the figure on the right-hand side, you will see a center square. I think it is a center violet square, which is sustainable. The orange area is partially sustainable, blue is partly sustainable, and red and yellow and other colors are not sustainable at all. So this is what we have to think of integrated water resources management. Next one. Now, what are the key issues which we are facing today, if you ask me? Growing water crisis and need for urgent action. If you take India, there are certain areas which have already become water stress. That is to say, the per capita water availability is less than 1,700. Some have become already water scarce. It is less than 1,000 cubic meter per capita, and some have become actually acute water scarce, where the availability is less than 500 cubic meter per capita. Now there is a growing water crisis and there are water conflicts, therefore. And there are water governance issues, crisis, which is also a major crisis with regard to India especially. And people are not having security, water security. And gender disparities still continue in the water sector. If you want to have the drudgery of water, non-availability of water, it is generally taken up by women. They carry water, they manage water in each household and even in farms now. And our ecosystems are degrading, getting polluted, and there is a need to protect them. So we go to the next. Now, if you ask me, what is sustainable development? The World Commission on Environment Development in our common future said, development that meets the needs of present generation without compromising the future generations to meet their own needs is what we mean by sustainable development. And if you are thinking in terms of sustainable development of water resources, we have to think of the ecosystem or holistic approach to achieve the global, to the goal of sustainable development of water. Well, it is easy to talk about holistic approach, but it is difficult to practice holistic approach because it has to integrate the complex web of interactions in nature. If you look at the left-hand side of the figure, you go to the land, water, biomass, air, etc. And the interactions among them will have to be understood properly. And on the right-hand side, you've got still complex web of human needs and values. Human needs, mainly, I won't say need, human greed and gluttony. The clothing, the food, water, luxury, shelter, everywhere you find greed and gluttony. And that has to be integrated. And finally, both these webs, spider webs, will have to be integrated into one if we have to have a holistic approach in water resources management. Next one. Now, holistic approach for a basin planning, its integrated approach is desirable. Sustainability be kept in mind. Knowledge of present condition of basins essential. Physical features and resource potential of the existing basins. Social and economic factors within the basin. Dynamics of causes and effects in the basin. Interrelationship among different factors. All these will have to be understood when we go for a holistic approach. Now, what are the principles of integrated water resources management? If you ask me, fresh water is a finite and vulnerable source. If you ask me, the total global annual rainfall and total global annual losses are finite, though the need of the population for water is increasing. Water management to be based on participatory approach. Women to play a central role in water management. Water is an economic good. We will look into each one of that. Before that, you see the graph on the right-hand side. Europe and Asia are in problem. Availability of water. The water which is utilized and water which is available, if you look at it, we are not in a very safe position. Of course, Americas are slightly better. We go to the next. Now, if you ask me, water is a finite source. The annual average rainfall and annual average losses are balanced. If you look at the right-hand side, the per capita water availability in India For 2025 and 50, it is projected, but otherwise it is actual data. You see how the per capita water availability in cubic meter is decreasing from 2,400, how it has come to 1,100. It is going to come to 1,100. 1,000 and below is water scarce, and 500 and below is acute water scarce. So we are moving towards water scarcity. Added to that, we have got the climate change and all the aspects to compete with climate change. Now, UN General Assembly on sustainability, in the General Assembly they discussed it. And the Executive Director of UNEP said there should be involvement of stakeholders, as has been told by the principles of IWRM, encouraging public participation, raising public awareness, and building capacity, developing appropriate institutional structures. These are needed for integrated water resources management in the watersheds and basins of this world. Next one. Now, what is scarcity? Scarcity is the fundamental economic problem of having seemingly unlimited human wants in a world of limited resources. As I have said, water is finite and our needs are infinite. So without scarcity, there is no need for governance. So that is about scarcity. So there is a scarcity, therefore we need a water governance. And what is governance? The sum of the many ways individuals and institutions, public and private, manage their common affairs. It is a continuing process through which conflicting or diverse interests may be accommodated and cooperative action may be taken. The Commission on Global Governance, 1995. Next. And water is an economic good. I made a statement. It is highly conflicting, highly controversial statement. Water has multiple uses. Uses generate value. Using for water for one purpose makes it unavailable for other purposes. There is an opportunity cost for water, therefore. When water which is essential for ecosystem is used for irrigation, there is a conflict. We should understand that. An economic good, putting water to its best use, figure out value in different uses. Pick use with highest value. Figuring out highest value use, you can have opinion poll, referendum, representatives, regulations, valuation study, donations, market, etc. are involved in it. Now, as an economic good, if you look at the top right, water for urban use not available for agriculture. Right below, water for irrigation not available for fish. So think of what is value and give an opportunity cost. Integration rarely create river basin scales. In ancient India, we did not have integration at larger scale. For example, we had small dikes to take care of the mangroves in Vietnam and Asia, which is not a total integrated approach. Line tanks of Thar Desert or the Kundis or even the tanks of Tamil Nadu and Karnataka, they had small integrated management practices, but not on a large scale. Contour bunds constructed in the hill slopes of Pakistan and India, especially in Kerala, it doesn't have an integrated approach. It is one of the soil and water conservation measures. Open wells and horizontal wells, which are seen as surangams in Kerala, and the wells available all over South India. This also doesn't go into an integrated, large-scale integrated water resources, river basin management. Next. Now we have to think of the water balance concepts here. There is a blue and green water. Blue water is which available in the aquatic ecosystems. Green water is the water which is sent out by the plants, by other growth to the atmosphere back. And there should be a balance between the blue and green water if you want to manage water resources properly. Upstream and downstream requirements. If you think of more of upstream requirements, the downstream water quality problems will arise. If you think more of downstream requirements, the upstream requirements in the hill slopes will not be met. So there should be a balance between the two. The human and ecosystem needs. If you think that irrigation is the only thing, as in Kaveri Delta, the downstream ecosystem, wetland ecosystem suffers. So this balance also will have to be met. And irrigation and drinking water, irrigation and energy, all these are in conflict. And quantity and quality aspects, as I have said, downstream quality suffers when the upstream requirements are more. So this will have to think. In all these, ecosystems play a major role. They are environmental resource. Ecosystems, both terrestrial and aquatic, in a river basin are interconnected mainly through water. Water is the transporting medium. Just take this Periyar River Basin in Kerala. It's one of the largest river basins in this state of Kerala. You see, a century and quarter back, the waters of Mullaperiyar was transferred to Tamil Nadu. This was constructed during the British time as part of an agreement between the then British government of India and the Travancore state. That much water is not coming down in Periyar. Then in 1970s, the Idiki Reservoir was constructed and the water from the reservoir was transferred to Muvattupuzha River Basin to produce power. In order to get a larger head, it had to be transferred to Muvattupuzha. What happened? That much water is not available for downstream. And on the upper side, you had the Idamalayar Dam hydroelectric project, followed by the Periyar Valley project for irrigation. Because of all those water utilization, they never bothered about the requirements downstream. So much so, the lower reaches of Periyar became what you call a hot spot of water quality problems. And the sewage and also the untreated industrial effluents from the industrial hub, they were all discharged into the lower reaches of Periyar. Quality became a major problem there. To overcome that, many actions have been taken, but still it is not properly sorted out. And because of all these, we have learned a lesson that the upstream overexploitation creates downstream water quality problem, which will have to be sorted out. Next one. Now, river basin planning success stories from Asia. We have got Uncut River Basin, which is being managed by the National Power Corporation of Philippines. Catchment treatment to sustain electricity generation, regulating land use activities, participatory approach and enhancing the socio-economic status, generating income from agricultural plantations to meet part of the catchment treatment expense. This is a successful case study from Philippines. Next one. The United Nations, UNEP took an special interest in the management. Next one. In the management of the Mekong River. The lower riparians wanted to have a management practice for their survival. About 0.8 million square kilometer of area shared by 6 riparian countries. Mekong Secretariat has got Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam as members. And an international agreement was signed by lower riparian countries, though China kept off from that. And now today, if you look at it, it's a success story of managing the lower reaches of Mekong River. The participating countries are satisfied. Next one. Now, when we are talking about ecosystems, I will broadly classify them into the terrestrial and aquatic ecosystem. Between the terrestrial and aquatic ecosystem, in the larger definition, you've got something in between, which if you want, you can call it an ecotone, but I call it an ecosystem. It is the wetland ecosystem. Now, if you look at a terrestrial ecosystem generally, is dry, rich biochemical source, low to medium primary productivity. What you have to understand here is that it is mainly a source. Aquatic ecosystem, if you take it, is flooded. Sink for, it serves as a sink for biochemicals, low primary productivity. And in between, you got the wetland ecosystem, which is often waterlogged. Serve as a source, sink, and transformer. And it has got high primary productivity. And these are, in general, the ecosystems which we are talking about. Now, I will deal with 3 terrestrial ecosystems and a wetland ecosystem in my talk. The ecosystems considered is forest ecosystem and environmental reserve, agricultural ecosystem, land water linkages, urban ecosystem, population pressure, inland wetland, modifying the hydrologic regime. Next one. If you think of the forest ecosystem, if you take the south of India, part of north of India, from Kanyakumari to Tapti, River Tapti, you have got a forest ecosystem in the Western Ghats. And most of the rivers in this region originate from the Western Ghats. And this is very important because Western Ghats serve as a water tank for those states which are depending on it, through which it passes through. Now, on the right-hand side, you have got a thick forest. And below that, on the right-hand side, you have got people who are cutting the forest and taking away the wood. This is happening in large scale. Next one. If you look at it, what role the forests play in water conservation and management, if you ask me? During my postdoctoral work, I worked in these 2 watersheds in Wales. If you look at it, you got on the top, on the right-hand side, top, you got the Plinlimmon watershed, which is a forested watershed. And at the bottom, you got the Y watershed, Y catchment, which is exploited. And if you see below, you got a hydrograph. You can see the Y catchment hydrograph shoots up, comes to the peak, while the hydrograph of Plinlimmon is a smooth curve because of the forest. Forests allow water to store in it like a sponge and lets it out slowly, so that your needs during the period when there is no rainfall is met by the forest. So forests contribute to maintain the hydrologic regime, water balance of the basin watershed. Also to conserve soil, water and bioresources. Downstream and coastal ecosystems depend much on upstream water management strategies. Next one. Now, forest ecosystem, hydrology and related functions, if you ask me, they break the impact of rainfall, recharge and add to summer flows, direct interception from the canopy, dissipation of soil moisture by evapotranspiration, containing floods and binding the soil against erosion, holding moisture by blotter effect of litter. Also influence the microclimate. The temperature in the forest catchments of Kerala is less by 2 to 3 degrees Celsius when compared to the deforested catchments at the same elevation. Next one. Now, we took up 3 forest sites. In each of these sites, we had 3 small watersheds of 2 square kilometers in area. Each of this watershed had a virgin catchment with more than 60% canopy, a dense forest catchment with more than 60% canopy, a partially exploited one between 30 and 60% canopy, and one with a less than 30% canopy fully exploited. That is a definition which we gave. I'm highlighting this study carried out by our team for Ministry of Environment Forest because many forest hydrology studies have not been conducted in this country from a scientific point of view. Next one. It was heavily instrumented. Each one of these 2 square kilometer watershed was heavily instrumented. For example, you have got the Class A meteorological yard on the top left, the evaporimeter in the center, and on the right side, you have got the stream flow measuring where. At the bottom on the left, you have got the infiltration study going on. At the center, you have got an instrument for measuring the through fall. We call it through fall troughs. And on the right-hand side, at the bottom, you have got a stem collar to measure the stem flow. So this helps us in having a water balance study of the forest, partially exploited and fully exploited forest area. Next one. If you look at it, the unit hydrograph, on the left-hand side, you've got a graph from the forest catchment. Water remains for a longer time. You've got a smooth curve hydrograph for the forest catchment. In the middle, you have got the partially exploited. The hydrograph is not as smooth as the one on the left-hand side. On the extreme right-hand side, you have got from the fully exploited watershed, it's a steep hydrograph. Next one. If you look at this 2 square kilometer watersheds in the forest area of Kerala, we find that in the Western Ghats, you find that in the 2 square kilometer forested watershed, the flows remain 12 months from June 1st to May end. In the partially exploited watershed, by February, the flows ended. And in the fully exploited watershed, the flows ended in December. Please remember the monsoon season. Southwest monsoon is from June to August, and Northeast monsoon is from September to November. And by December, the fully exploited watershed did not have any flows at all. Next one. And we also had a look at the suspended sediments. Suspended sediments from the exploited watershed was 10 times more than the suspended sediments from dense forest catchments. If you look at, this is the bed load moment. If you look at the bed load moment in the month of June, from the forest, the exploited catchment, you have got 6 times more bed load moment than the forested catchment. If you look at all the months, you find that it's almost 6 times more from the fully exploited catchment. Next one. If you look at the temperature, the microclimate, there will be a difference of maximum temperature and minimum temperature if you take more or less 2 to 3 degrees Celsius less in the forest catchment. Please remember, it's only 2 square kilometer area catchment. It's all in the same elevation close by. Next one. So, procedures for evaluating land treatment of forest ecosystem, if you take soils, vegetation, use and condition of forest watershed is surveyed. Estimate the areas of exploitation with and without a land treatment program in place. Estimate stream flow for vegetative conditions with and without the treatment programs. Differences between the stream flow for the two conditions is a measure of effect of land treatment. So here I am saying that the stream flow can be used as an indicator of the density of vegetation in a catchment. Next one. Techniques used to quantify the benefits of treatment in forest ecosystem: evaluation by infiltration procedure, evaluation by multiple regression considering a set of dependent and independent variables, evaluation by regional analysis, effect of peak discharge and effect of fire on erosion rates, evaluation by hydrographics analysis, and evaluation by runoff number procedure, which is promulgated by the US Soil Conservation Bureau. Next one. Now, from the forest ecosystem, we go to the agricultural watershed, which I call as land water linkages, as called by FAO, Food and Agricultural Organization. Integral concept of land as a system traversed by water. Land use depending on access to water, among other factors. Land use affecting the passing water in its pathways, seasonality, yield, and quality. Water passing through a landscape is influenced by anthropogenic activities in that landscape. Water influences land use, but also becomes a constraint on land use and socioeconomic and biomass production. Agricultural ecosystem is important from the point of view of integrated water resources management. Next one. This is the land-based phase of the hydrologic cycle, which has an impact on the land-water linkages. You have got the interception and you have got the soil moisture storage and through flow, and you have got the groundwater storage, you have got the base flow. So you have got all these are having an impact on soil, land, water linkages. Next one. What is a green water and what is a blue water, which we were talking about? Green water flow, if you look at it, it is from the forest, the wetland vegetation, agricultural land, all these water which goes as evapotranspiration is called green water. And all that water which remains in the aquatic ecosystem for meeting the other needs of human beings, not crops and agriculture, but also drinking water and other purposes, industrial use and all that, is blue water. Next one. Generally, they say that the balance should be something like 65% and 35%. Now you have an idea about the green water from the forest, from the grasslands, from the wetlands, from the croplands. And you have got the blue water which is flowing in the river, the lakes, which again gets evaporated 10%. And some of this water come as return flow after agriculture and other uses. So this is a general idea about the classification of precipitation into green water and blue water. Next one. Now, next one. Yeah, this is a general idea to give you about the green and blue water. Now, what we have to think of when we are talking about water management for agriculture is water is not independent. It is dependent on land. If there is a land degradation, it affects the land. If the soil thickness goes down, it affects the water. And if the water goes down, it affects the bioresources. And if the bioresources is degraded, it affects the land. So it is an inseparable trinity. Integration of land and water for managing biomass is an integrated, inseparable trinity. Next one. Now, let's have a look at how soil and water are connected. We carried out a study using this universal soil locus equation, integrating GIS with the ILWIS model, integrated land water model. ILWIS model, we try to integrate these two and try to see the factors like hydrology, soils, land use, topography, geography, crop factor, etc. we considered in this and integrated with the GIS to find out, to make a decision support system for soil and water conservation in a small watershed. Next one. These are the type of maps which we have got. We have got a digital elevation map on the top, which gives you also the drainage pattern. And you have got a three-dimensional map on the left-hand side bottom. And you have got, this is a watershed in Wayanad in the east flowing river of Bhavani. You have got a slope map on the right top. And you have got of the same Pykara Watershed a topographic factor map on the right-hand side. All these are needed for feeding into the USLA to predict. Next one. Now, of the Pykara Watershed, you have got the soil erosion map on the left top side. That is for scenario 1. And on the bottom, you have got the scenario 3. What you find is that on the right-hand side bottom, the scenario 3, you have got more erosion. And on the top, you have got less erosion. It's mainly because of the soil conservation measures already incorporated in the watershed as a part of the earlier projects in this basin. Next one. Now, you can have a query. Suppose if you want to restrict the soil erosion rate to 25 tons per hectare per year in the whole basin, what has to be done? This query can be answered. And you can find out the areas where water conservation can be carried out, soil conservation measures can be carried out, and soil erosion rate brought down. Next one. This is a case study which we had made. You know that this is a small watershed which was totally shaven off. There was no plants or no activity in this. It was an eroding hill watershed. This was taken over by a farmer who went in for soil and water conservation measures. He went in for trenches, he went in for contour trenches, he went for contour terraces, he went for plantation, he went for constructing wells there, and he went for a soil conservation measure around his house and the well. All these brought in greenery there, soil there, water there. At the end of the day, he made this area something like a forest. And he did not have water in his well initially. Within 3 years, he had water in the well, which he was using for his household purposes. And there was no water in the ponds. After the interventions, he found that when I went there, I found that he was growing white lotus, red lotus, and blue lotus within his compound. And at the bottom of the watershed, there was a stream flowing. There was no water at all in that stream. After the interventions, 3 years after, if you consider subsurface flow as in this type of topography as 1 meter per day, it took about 3 years for that stream to flow. And this stream flowing is an indicator that his water conservation measures have succeeded. This is a case study from Punalur. Next one. Now we go to the urban watershed where you got the population pressure. When the urban areas develop in this country, what happens is that you have got the natural drainage as A. You can see the original network. When the roads come, you cut across the drainage, the street, gutter, and drain pattern superimposed on the natural pattern by suburbanization. That's what you find in the center. And see the total network, partly natural and partly artificial. This is what we see. I went to a city. I was living in the city of Calicut. There people were telling me that there is a flooding when it rains in the road. I told them that it is not a road, it is a drainage, which you have converted into a road. And when it rains, if there is a flooding there, if there is a flash flood, you cannot blame the drain for that. It is, you have converted the drain into a road. This is what has happened in most of our towns, and the flash floods are a result of this. Next one. Now, what you find here is that in the urban watershed and non-urban watershed, you got that blue and red. You find on the top, you got the urban watershed, the unaffected watershed, and the bottom, you got the urban watershed. In an urban watershed, you got a hydrograph which peaks fast at the bottom. And on the top, you got a smooth curve where infiltration is there, everything is taking place. Next one. Now, dissolved oxygen sag curve in an urban area, if you look at it, dissolved oxygen, it goes on sagging, and at 20-mile point, it is slowly building up, water is improving. So this is what happens when we put the sewage into our, without treatment, into the water sources. Next one. Now, water services cycle in urban areas, if you think of, on the left-hand side, you've got the sources and treatment. The river, or you can have a reservoir or a borehole, that is a source. From that, you have got the transmission. You have got the water treated. Water treatment works. Then you have got water tower, a reservoir, or you have got a service reservoir from which it is conveyed to the companies, the fields, and to the households. And you should have a sewage treatment for both. The effluent should be treated as well as we have to treat the household water. Finally, when it reaches river, it should be within the permissible limits of Central Pollution Control Board or Bureau of Indian Standards or whatever it is. So this is the cycle through which the urban water has to go through. Next one. You can go for rainwater harvesting. In the urban areas where you don't have actual sources, we need not tax the natural sources. We can straight away take the rainwater and then store it. Next one. This is from Bhubaneswar, where they were having artificial wetlands to treat water. And this has been successfully done for about 15% of the total population of Bhubaneswar. This has been a project funded by India-Canada Environment Facility, carried out by the Management Institute in Bhubaneswar, ZIMP, and the Fisheries Department of that area. What they had is that they had 3 types of tanks. Primary treatment will be in the first tank, then they will have duckweeds in the next tank, and they will have fish in the third tank. And fish is being marketed in Bhubaneswar. Next one. East Calcutta wetland is a Ramsar site, which is declared as a Ramsar site for its ability to treat the entire sewage of Calcutta Corporation. It's a Ramsar site, deltaic fringes of Calcutta city. Silting up of this was formed by silting up of Vidyadhari, led by the emergence of East Calcutta wetland. Unique values of this wetland, which was declared as a Ramsar site, is sewage treatment for the entire city of Calcutta, livelihood for many, fish and vegetable supply to Calcutta market, around 1,000 million liter per day water is treated here. Sewage treated fisheries, 11,000 metric ton per annum, and almost 10,000 fishermen depend on this East Calcutta wetland. Next one. At the pumping station, you have got BOD 180, which at the final outlet is only 90. COD 600 milligram per liter, which comes down to 40. Total solids, it comes from 370 to 44. Fecal E. coli from 2.4 into 10 to the power of 6, it comes down to less than 1,000. This is what the East Calcutta wetland does to treat the sewage of Calcutta Corporation. It's a big service which it does. Next one. Now, this is a small system which you can use in small institutions. It is an artificial wetland which treats the wastewater from the canteen of Center for Water Resources Development and Management in Calicut. Next one. These type of standalone systems also can be useful. This is the level of treatment which it does. Next one. Now we come to the inland wetlands, modifying the hydrologic regime.
420.
420.
420.
Inland wetlands, modifying the hydrologic regime. Wetlands are lands, transitional and aquatic systems where the water table is usually at or near the surface, or the land is covered by shallow water intermittently or all through the year. Attributes of wetlands: at least periodically, the land supports predominantly hydrophytes. Hydrophytes are plants which grow in water. Substrata is predominantly undrained hydric soil. Substrata is non-soil and is saturated with water or covered by shallow water at some time during the growing season of the year. What I wanted to say is that these are the attributes which we'll have to use to classify the wetlands, identify the wetlands, and protect the wetlands. Next one. Now, these are the type of wetlands according to the Ramsar Convention, from the upstream of the mountains down to the coastal belt, to the mangroves and the mud flats and the coral reefs and all that. And you have got the agricultural wetlands there, the oxbow lakes there and the upstream, all that. Next one. Important values and attributes of wetlands, if you ask me, from an integrated water resources management perspective: containing floods and regulating flows, recharging groundwater, purifying water, providing an aquatic ecosystem for wildlife, fisheries and agriculture, health, water sports and tourism. You go to the graph on the right-hand side top. You see wetlands protect downstream reaches from floods. It stores water. Because of the wetland, the steep curve which should have been there on right top has been smoothed by the wetlands. And in the channel, water comes in a regulated fashion. Wetlands regulate floods. The bottom one, depending on the number of wetlands, the peak flow comes down. If you've got several wetlands reclaimed in the upland region, it will affect the peak flows. So these are two things which we may have to keep in our mind. Next one. Now, wetlands are also controlled by biotic components of wetlands. For example, peat building and sediment trapping controls the floods. Water shading brings down the evaporation rate. And shedding of the leaves by the plants near the wetlands brings down the transpiration. And the vegetation binds sediments, reduces erosion. Vegetation and peat building interrupt flows. Next one. Now, if you look at a conceptual model, conceptual hydrologic model of a wetland, showing the direct and indirect effects of hydrology on wetlands. If the energy, if flooding is high, then the toxins, the sediments, and then other biochemicals get out of the wetlands and wetland gets modified. If the energy is less, the toxins, the sediments, biochemicals, biogeochemicals, they settle down in the wetland. And the characteristic of wetland changes and gets wetland gets modified. If you come down to the bottom, second cascade, you find that if the energy is more, the chemicals and pollutants get exported, the wetland get modified. Otherwise, the chemicals and pollutants get deposited, and the characteristics of the wetland get changed. At the bottom, if the energy is more and the chemicals and biogeochemicals get out of the wetland flora and fauna will be different. If it settles down in the wetland, the flora and fauna of the wetland will be different. It changes. So the hydrology of the wetland, the energy balance of the wetland due to hydrology decides the chemical, physical, and biological processes in a wetland. Even you think of the fish egg, if the energy is more, it gets out of the wetland. Next one. Now, the basic theory, if you ask me, the volume of what is the rate of change of volume of a wetland is equal to the precipitation, the surface flow inflow, surface inflow, groundwater inflow, minus evapotranspiration, minus surface water outflow, minus groundwater outflow. If it is a coastal wetland, plus or minus the tides. So this gives you the rate of change of volume in a wetland, which is very important to be estimated. And it depends on the management practices of a river. Integrated management practices of a river will depend on, will influence the rate of change of volume in a wetland. Next one. The rate of change of level of a wetland depends on rate of change of volume and area at that particular height where you want to have delta L. And turnover time, T inverse 1 is equal to total inflow rate by average volume of water storage in a wetland. The reciprocal of it is the residence time. Next one. These things are needed when we are managing a wetland. Yeah. This is with regard to the Loktak Lake. We were chartered, CWRDM was chartered to give a management action plan for the operation of the reservoir. What we find is maximum storage level was found out, minimum storage level was found out, the required water levels for managing, I'm talking about now biodiversity, the Kaibul-Limjo National Park was determined. The park was in a problem because it was getting inundated and it had affected the growth of brow antlered deers, Sangai deers of this wetland. Water levels beyond the above limits, after meeting all of the demands, can be released to the barrage down to Airavati and then to Burma. Next one. With regard to the Chilka Lake, you had in the Mahanadi, you had the Hirakud project, and when the Naraj barrage came, the entire freshwater flow to Chilka Lake was blocked. And what happened by blocking that water? The sediments coming from the western catchments blocked the mouth, and Chilka became a freshwater wetland, and freshwater weeds started growing in it. Till next one. A new mouth was cut open, and the salinity level came to normal. Airavati dolphins came back, the migratory birds came back, fish catch became 100% more than the earlier one. All this because the salinity levels in the lake came back to its original status. Next one. Now coming to the Vembanad backwater system in Kerala. Next one. You see the conflicting and complementary uses. Next one. You know, fisheries and agriculture are conflicting because fisheries wants floods, agriculture doesn't want floods. Fisheries wants salinity, agriculture doesn't want salinity. Next one. Fisheries and industries, industrial effluents adversely affect the fisheries. Next one. Fisheries and Tanirmukam barrage to control salinity are conflicting. And fisheries and Thotapalli spillway, which doesn't allow floods to happen, are conflicting. Next one. Flood containing and agriculture are conflicting. Next one. Interventions and ecological values are because no flushing takes place. Next one. Industry and ecological values are conflicting. Next one. Tourism and ecological values are conflicting because the houseboats are not properly maintained often. Next one. Flood containing and fisheries are complementary. Agriculture and interventions are complementary. Inland transport and tourism are complementary. Next one. Here, if you are thinking in terms of conserving and protecting a river, we have to get rid of the present situation of single function investment. See the bottom? From the single function investment, we'll have to move to asset management planning, to catchment management planning, to land use planning and control, and integrated catchment planning. Go to the top, it brings you to sustainable development for water environment. And to reach from the present situation to the sustainable development for water and environment in a river system, we have to go through a few arcs. Arcs are institutional framework and legislation, environmental economics and economic instruments, environmental appraisal for policies and strategy, strategic environment assessment for plans and programs, individual awareness and commitment and partnership approach, public involvement and environmental pressure groups. All these arcs, if we can go through, we will come to sustainable development for water, environment, from the present situation of single function investment. Next one. I just wanted to say different levels, the farmer level to farmer groups level to irrigation services, which is being done by the irrigation department and PWD. What are the functions of the local self-government, the basin authority, and at the national level, the policies and legislation which will have to come. And regional level, the intergovernmental and the global level, what we have to do with regard to integrated river basin management. Next one. Thank you. I think I have kept up my time. What is the time now?
4:35.
4:30? Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir, for that inspiring session. I'm afraid as a couple of online external faculties are waiting, we have to move forward. So,
Thank you. Thank you very much.
sir.
I go for my work.
So thank you so much. Oh, see, left. Hello, sir.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Anil. Thank you very much.
No, we can have one or two questions, I believe.
Fast.
Yeah.
I am sandwiched between the meetings.
Oh.
No problem.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
there is a
So
question, you can
you
ask.
covered very comprehensively the subject. So I would say, particularly with reference to those 4 ecosystems. Do you have any pressing question? Maybe one question, 1 or 2 questions. Yeah.
Vijay, you'll have to call Bennett, say that 5 more minutes.
Good afternoon, sir. I listen your wonderful presentation. Sir, I have a question. You said that forest ecosystem have roles to conserve and manage water bodies. My question is, kindly suggest some plant species which have roles to maintain the water level of wetlands. Like,
Can you repeat it?
sir, in catchment area, have you suggest any plant species to planting some plant species to maintain the water level of wetlands?
Anil, can you repeat it louder?
So now the species which are suitable for the catchment area planting. Because since you are, you may not be able to.
Species suitable for catchment area. The species, plant species.
Yeah, the species will vary from zone to zone. Because we are talking about India, you've got the humid tropics, semi-arid, arid, and semi-humid regions. Each one of these regions will have different species. So we have to understand the species diversity with regard to the country. So whatever indigenous species are there, we may have to go for that. And let us not go for any exotic species, and later we will have to repent. So my suggestion is that species will have to be chosen considering the zone from which we are considering the river basin, plus the different agroclimatic zones will have to be selected, and plants suitable for different agroclimatic zones will have to be planted. I think
So especially for maintaining the water levels of water bodies. Maintain the water level.
Water level
Water levels.
of
water levels of,
Water bodies means wetlands, like wetlands.
you know, first and foremost thing is that catchment treatment is one of the things which will not only conserve soil, but also water. And there are different methods for soil and water conservation in the catchment. You can go for contour bunding, contour trenching, or species afforestation. This is what we tried in Attapadi, and what we found was that at the end of the day, by afforestation, we could bring back the flows in the small streamlets in Attapadi. Those streamlets are streamlets of Bhavani. 3-4 such streamlets could be brought back by going in for afforestation using the indigenous species. And it has been a success story.
Left. Good evening, sir. Thank you for your insightful lecture. Since you spoke about on 4 ecosystems, and my question is with regard to the Miyawaki forest, because it's often projected as a ready-made solution, for the ecological preservation and all. Is it really viable as it is projected? Because as far as I believe what I have gathered, I see more it as a kind of an urban-centered solution. So I'd like to know your take on it. Thank you.
Sir, can you tell what was that?
Miyawaki forest.
Miyawaki forest.
Huh?
Miyawaki forest
Huh.
is considered as a solution, easy solution,
Ready-made solution.
ready-made solution.
I don't think that it is an easy solution. You know, as I have said, we have to depend on the indigenous species and indigenous practices for catchment treatment. I feel there is no shortcut for all this. And it has to be based on detailed study that we will have to go for that. For example, when we wanted to afforest the catchments in Attapadi, we had carried out considerable studies. And then we zeroed down on the plant species to be cultivated. I think Sabu will answer some of your questions. It is not audible for me here. I think Sabu will answer the questions on this particular aspect, because it is not audible for me here.
Next session is about that. I will handle that question.
Next
In the next
session,
session.
like that. Same thing. Next session, he will handle that, sir.
Okay, fine, good. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you. I got a meeting. I'm sorry. I'm in a hurry. That's why. Thank you. Thank you very much. But I will again come back in the afternoon, in the evening, so
Thank you,
we
sir.
can have more discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we can continue, right? So we will move on to the next session. That is about the riverine system biodiversity in India. So we have Dr. T. Sabu. He's with he was with Center for Environment and Development, Trivandrum, as its program director. He has over 37 years of experience in the natural resource management and environment management sector. His area of expertise include natural resource, environment management, biodiversity conservation, wetland management, urban environment management, etc. So with Dr. Sabu, there's a team with Dr. Shaji PK. He was with Environmental Resource Research Center, Trivandrum. Experienced scientist with a demonstrated history of working in the environment service industry. His skills are in sustainable development, plant ecology, biodiversity and environmental impact assessment. And also we have Dr. N. Unnikrishnan as a botanist and bamboo specialist. He was a professor, retired professor from NSS College, Patnamthitta. He's also with Kottayam Nature Society as a secretary. His expertise is in botany and ecology. And also we have Dr. Joby Paul. He's assistant professor in botany with St. Thomas College, Thrissur. He has done the vegetation analysis, ecology and vegetation analysis in the Pampa River Basin. So then we also have Dr. G.N. Hariharan, who is the executive director and also a lichen specialist joining us online. So I hand over the session to Dr. Sabu to lead the. Thank you.
In 5 rivers of Kerala. And based on which I just want to introduce how the study is done. I have so many slides here. I will go fast and I will finish in my presentation in 10 or 15 minutes. And so that in the interactive section, we can have more discussion. So next slide, please. As you all know, you are all experts from various groups, various disciplines, and you know, and you have a basic understanding about the riverine system, and especially the riparian, the services provided by the rivers. And I have just listed some of the services by the Dr. James has already explained some of these things in his talk. I'm not going to deep into this. Next slide. The thing we have to be in mind is that rivers are far more than waters within the within their banks. So that is, you can see then the picture, you can see that this is Pamba River, how this river, the water is coming to the main river. So this is the basic thing we have to be in mind when we plan something to restore the river, or for any activities to be planned in river basins. Next slide. And as Dr. James mentioned in his presentation, healthy ecosystems in the river basins is the most important component of the river health. We are talking about healthy rivers and the river health. So we have to maintain the ecosystems in their basins. That is, it is in the picture I has given a sacred grove in the midst of the. He was talking about urban water systems. This is in the midst of Cochin Corporation, Kalamassery Municipality. They have kept some 8 acres of land forest by a botanist, my friend, his family. Actually, formerly it was used for irrigating their paddy fields. About their family was having around 100 acres of paddy fields earlier. So these 8 acres of forest, they have there is a temple also inside this forest, and you can see that this is photo I have taken April 2-3 years before, month of April. You can see the water there in the pond, and it is overflowing to the paddy fields they are having. So that is the importance of the ecosystems. Especially sacred groves, forest, etc. So the riverine vegetation, when we speak about riverine vegetation, it differ from place to place. See, this is river origin in Kolatupuzha. This is mangrove swamps. So you can see here this swamp, from this swamp a stream is originating, and if you cut down this swamp area, then that stream flow will not be there. So that is the importance of the vegetation. But the vegetation, the riparian vegetation is now under threat due to various reasons, mainly because of the there is no water, the scarcity of water in the dry seasons. After monsoon, there will not be any water in the river systems, and also waste dumping, this type of river bank slumping, and you can see this clay mining, and you can see agricultural practices like planting near to the streams, encroachment, and you can see this the right picture, that is people working in the MNREG. There is a stream flowing, and see in Kerala streams you can see mainly pandanus species. This pandanus species is responsible for cleaning the water and also for the other biodiversity like fishes, crabs, prawns, etc. So if we do like this type of cleaning activities, then nothing will be there. So like that, this is another plant, this Kabamba, it is an indicator for, see, this is in Vamanapuram River, below the hotel in Palod, Maharani Hotel. Their wastewater is there. So this plant, Kabamba, is growing mainly in wastewater. So that is some types of indicators. Next slide. See. this is what is happening to our streams. The red spots, we have made a GIS map for during a study of Mangroves River Basin. See, this is the hidden drainages. They have built up on the drainage, either roads or any buildings like that. They have crossed the stream flow. So that is what is happening. That is one of the main reason for water stress condition in the river. Next. So this is another major study we have done for the 4 rivers of Kerala. Dr. Joby was also there for this project. And after the 2018 flood in Kerala, we have conducted a detailed analysis of the vegetation, impact of the flood on the riparian vegetation in Pamba, Periyar, Chalakudi, and Bharatapuzha rivers. And next. So this is Pamba river. Next. Periyar. Next. Then this is Chalakudi and Bharatapuzha. Next. See, this is the approach for the studies that we have made the people who have conducted their studies in this area, especially Joby has done the his thesis or PhD thesis on riparian vegetation in Pamba. Like that, so many people, Periyar also has done earlier studies have been done. So we have made a consortium and initiated this study. And with this field map, we went with the grid map. We went to the field to study the riparian vegetation, both sides about 50 meters. We are surveying. A rapid survey has been conducted for 2-3 months by the research fellows and the resource persons. So we have conducted data like this, place name, physical features of the area, bank erosion, what is happened to the bank, floodwater level, major vegetation types, what are the, whether there is natural vegetation is there or it is agricultural vegetation, or like that. Detailed notes were taken with the GIS map and the current vegetation and all that. And we have found that around 1,243 plant species are seen among the river banks of these 4 rivers of Kerala. 25% of them are trees, majority of them are herbs. So that is the next. I'm not going to the detail. We will share this presentation to you. And this is the floristic diversity of the species. Next one. And this we have made an assessment of about the plants with respect to its conservation value. So this is the IUCN red listed plants. One of the criteria was the IUCN red listed plants. We have seen around 40 plants are red listed. Next one. And endemic plants endemic to India or peninsular India, Western Ghats, Southern Western Ghats, Kerala, etc. We have some 198 plants endemic to this area, and medicinal plants used in as medicine. Next one. And then plants with other local importance. For example, this pandanus they are using for making mats, and also these bamboos. Like that, so many plants are calamus. They are using for making many things. These are some of the threatened plants. Next. So finally, we have made a map of what is the vegetation type of the banks, that is with the different colors, whether it is a natural vegetation, whether it is a cultivated area, cocoa, rubber, something like that. Next one. And what are the vegetation types we have just analyzed, and the physical impact of the bank by the flood. And these are some of the photographs in different after the flood. Next. And yes, deposition, sand deposition is one of the major impact. Next one. This is sand deposited areas. Next. Next. So major the riparian vegetation was highly impacted during the flood, and Pamba is the most affected area, affected river. And the complete loss of a plant which is having more conservation importance is not noted, but this species, Laginandra caerlensis, is a species described from Budatangat. That area is now submerged under deposited by mud, and a high spread of invasive species around 38 species are now emerging. New species are new invasive species are emerging in the deposited area. Next. This is the regarding the species affected by the flood. Next one. Next slide. So invasive species that also we represented graphically. Next one. So finally we have made. So somebody is asking about planting. Which species we have to plant for afforestation in the riparian area? For that, we have prioritized the species based on this criteria. First one is IUCN red listed plants. That is whether if it is critically endangered, we have given a rank of 20 marks. And endangered, vulnerable, like that. Endemic plants also we can consider. Then true riparian species. I have given in the graph what are the true riparian species that is growing in the near to the bank, near to the water level. Then that species and also it is not affected by the flood. That is we have identified. It has given a high rank. And other locally important plants, medicinal plants, and maximum 75. So based on which we have classified different species, very high priority species, high priority, medium priority, like that. Around 298 species is identified from different for the different regions also. We have mentioned for the highland, midland, lowland. Also, we have separate. A list of species identified for future restoration work. And also based on the data collected, we have prioritized the areas to be taken for restoration activities. These are the criteria for how to for high erosion area, and distribution of threatened species. Next, distribution of invasive species. Like that, we have made a map, prepared a map of the bank of the high impact area and medium, like that, high prioritized for the management activities. And we have around 12% of the area is found to be very high priority, and we have given next. This is one. And based on which we have prepared a landscape management plan for the restoration of the riparian vegetation, and also for the especially for the restoration of the riparian vegetation. And it was that is an ecosystem based approach, which is people centered, and we have detailed the plans to form the neighborhood groups with the participation of local bodies like Gram Panchayat, ward level, block Panchayat, district level, like that. And we have micro level data collection with the participation of the local volunteers. And it was done in the Vamanavaram River, and also in Pamba River. Biodiversity bodies now undertaking some restoration activities under the Rebuild Kerala project also. These are some of the activities we have suggested for the eco-restoration of springs, ponds, paddy fields, etc., and rainwater harvesting. Like next, traditional agricultural practices, afforestation practices, waste management practices. Slaughterhouse waste is also another problem. Next. Then the wastewater management, source level wastewater management programs, riverbank protection activities with vegetation, or even with some gabion type. This will allow previous slide, this will allow the plants to grow and also for the animals to breed. So this type of protection activities is suitable for the river bank. Next, then to avoid waste dumping, so this net type. And also some check dams in the highly polluted areas. This is a study in Periyar. You can see a small dam is constructed, like check dam is constructed. And this plant is Limnophila, heterophila. This is growing abundantly there because in the upstreams around the 50 families, tribal families, they are not having a toilet. So what is happening is the entire toilet waste is coming to this structure, and it is this water flowing downwards. We have tested that it is not contaminated. So that that type of plants for purification, water purification is also, and also for some cultural activities like livelihood activities, responsible tourism activities, like that, to promote livelihood also, socio-economic activities also. And also in some areas, we have suggested some local hydel without any construction and any dams, so you can have some electricity to be generated in some areas. Next. These are some of the photographs. Next. So this is a gist of what is we have done, so that you can have some interventions in your area to have a rapid assessment of the riparian vegetation. So now I hand over to Dr. Shaji. He will be talking more deeply about the species level planning or conservation methods. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabu sir. This talk also is more or less on the same subject, and you know, riparian restoration. But actually, when it comes to river restoration, we have to take the whole riverscape into account, and see, maybe you can have natural landscape, agricultural landscape, and urban landscape, and accordingly we have to plan that he has already mentioned. So I will my presentation is basically on the riparian vegetation. This particular presentation, it's a paper which I have done with my friend Dr. T. Shaju of the Tropical Botanic Garden and Research Institute. So riparian zone means is the merger zone between the land system, terrestrial system, and aquatic system. So it's a transition zone. So we may call it, refer it to as an amphibious system. You know, this area is continuously influenced by flooding and deposition of alluvial soil. So it's under stress. So typically there are some plants which are adapted to this particular stressful environment, and a distinctive flora that differs in structure and function from the adjacent terrestrial ecosystem. So so we can make out this by just viewing, and they usually form a linear pattern, so almost going parallel along the banks of the river, and the width of this may vary based on the geomorphology characteristics, slope characteristics, contour, and drainage characteristics of the river. So the width may vary, and then please, next slide, please. The functions, if you take the functions of riparian vegetation, riparian belt rather, so it stabilizes the river bank and controls sedimentation and preserves biodiversity. So there is distinctive biodiversity pattern which could be seen in this particular habitat, and provides habitats for a wide range of plants and animals. And particularly, some of the animals take refuge during summertime in this riparian habitats. It controls water quality and nutrient dynamics. That is another function it offered by the riparian vegetation. Yes. It provides food, refuge, and breeding grounds for several animals. It is particularly significant during summer, and then provides corridor for its movement, and then moderate river water temperature through transpiration, evapotranspiration, and by providing shade, and then keeps water table, particularly in the downstream plains. It is very, very significant, and then provides buffer zone that filters sediments and control nutrients. Next slide. And this picture representation. So the vegetated buffer zone cleans stormwater runoff before it enters the stream or river. It acts as a sponge or a filter, and the fertilizers, sediments, and pesticides coming from the nearby croplands are filtered here, and then it offers cleaning of such stormwater. Just, and this is a river in uh, Kasaragod district called Elkanah River, which is a tributary of River Shiria. So in summer, the river looks like this, but you can see the well-formed riparian vegetation over there. And then actually, there is no water. There is no water, but people extract water by digging dug wells, temporary dug wells, and using lift pump, they are extracting water. That means this indicates water. Okay, riparian vegetation supports groundwater recharge. Yes. And then there are several benefits offered by this. It provides many materials and services, which Sarah has already mentioned, and also it adds aesthetic value and provide green recreation space. That is another feature of this. Yes. Kerala has a complex web of river belts, because we have 44 rivers, rivulets, and then streams forming a network of all these. And then it supports remarkable species diversity, which he has already shown. And then structure, composition, and width of river. This is what I want to emphasize. Structure, composition, and width of riparian vegetation vary from upstream highland to the coastal lowlands through undulating midlands, depending on geomorphology, slope, flow characteristics, and salinity integration. And this part also, then there are species composition is different in all these regions. And when it comes to restoration, we have to take into account these factors. And then characteristic plants in riparian assemblages are mainly specialist, which I already mentioned, which are adapted to frequently disturbed river courses. So they are basically stress tolerant species of stress created by flooding and then deposition of alluvial soil. The riparian trees are characteristically evergreen. Maybe the nearby vegetation is dry deciduous, but riparian vegetation is typically evergreen. Yes, right. Yes, right. So there is the origin of Iravikulam River, which is a tributary of River Periyar. In the high ranges, it takes its origin from the Shola grassland complex. From the Shola, the river originates. You don't find any trees over there, and then because it is a grassland system, along the banks you may find some standard trees and grasses and shrubs. Like Arundin area is a grass. There is known as Colgate plant, Bultheria vagrantissima, and all these are found over there, but no trees. If you come down, next slide. If you come down, you will see trees colonizing and often forming storied structure. In the upper stories, you may find this Terminalia Arjuna, which is called Arjun. And then Mangifera indica is our mango, and then Hopia Panga. Such huge trees are found over there. That is in the upper story. The slide. In the middle story, you find Heliocarpus tuberculatus, a relative of Rudraksha. And then Humboldtia valiana, this is a typical riparian species. And Vatiria indica, that provides white dammer. So, and then Maduka nerifolia, this is related to Mahua. And then Neolamarchia Kadamba, this is very, very significant in this region. And then Hypnocarpus alpina is a medicinal tree. That is also, these are found in the middle story of the riparian system. And then again, if you come further down, then there may be some more additions like Caralia brachiata, Calophyllum calaba, or Alexandrian laurel. So the other names are in Malayalam, that's why I'm not pronouncing it. Then Ochrnuclea missionis, Trateva magna, or we call it Nirmadalam. And then Garcinia gummigata is Malabar gambuj. And then Calophyllum, Inophyllum. All these are colonizing in this in the middle zone. Next one. There are also small trees and shrubs like Homonia riparia, which grows right inside the river course. And then there is one species of Oplandra, a reed, that is Oplandra scriptoria. So there is also Oplandra travancourica that is found in the gallery. We call it Eta. And then Barringtonia racemosa and also Barringtonia acutangula. These are again small trees to shrubs found in the riparian system. And then before, and then the pandanus or screw pine. Pandanus screw pine. This is a fiber resource we have been presented older. It is made of pandanus leaves. And then Morinda citrifolia, which is now very sought after plant. It is noni, source of noni. And then Munja or Premna serratifolia, it's again a medicinal plant. Next. We also find some lianas and herbs in the system. Several of these are found. No, this one. And then in the coastal downstream, the mangroves colonies in the estuarine zone. Here again, the species assemblage varies with tidal influence, salinity gradient, and sediment characteristics. So with salinity gradient, the species composition varies. So when it comes to restoration of mangroves, these factors need to be taken into consideration. Yes. Then these are the true mangroves, which most of you, I think, we are familiar with. These are the true mangroves found in Kerala, particularly. Next, another set of true mangroves like Avicennia, Rhizophora, and so on. Next. And there are also mangrove associates. They are not mangroves, but found along with mangroves. So these, again, we can map. There are, and then though there are species of conservation significant. Most of the plants, a good number of plants are endemics. So its distribution is restricted to a particular geographical area. Say endemic to Western Ghats, even endemic to Kerala. And there are point endemism like endemic to Munnar. Such plants are also there. So likewise, we find several that Humboldtia valiana is an endemic species found along the river banks, most of the river banks in Kerala. And then many of them also figure in the endangered category or the rare category list of IUCN. The same Humboldtia valiana is again an endangered species. And then several medicinal plants are particularly found along the river. And one fellow is collecting Rotula aquatica, which is used for kidney stone. So this plant again, it grows along the river bed. And now regarding this, there are some phytogeographical importance to some of the elements. So one plant, that's Crinum malabaricum, which is found in Kerala, that is along the Adriatic belt of North Kerala. And then it's collected from a stream. a small stream like this, Aravanchal, again in Kasaragod district. And then the related species are found, one Painum natans in Cameroon of Africa, and another species, Rhinum thaianum, is found in Thailand. That means this shows this particular kind of thing could be identified as distinct disjunction, and this could be related to mountain drift and the cleavage. Next, then there are also evolutionary important. This particular Heliocolum cetaceum, this was reported in 1693, and now if you look at the same area, the type locality, you find again several other species. This was reported recently. That means new species are evolving in such stressful environments. Okay, next. Now the historical importance, again, the Hortus Malabaricus, which was published in the 17th century by Henrik Andrian van Reed, the then Dutch governor of Malabar province, and then it described about 670 species, of which a few are again riparian. So this was the habitats were also described in the book with beautiful illustrations. It was published in Latin, and now recently it has been translated into English and Malayalam. Next. Then again, there are several species of animals, fauna associated with the riparian birds, larger mammals like otter and fishing cat, birds, Sarville explained, and then reptiles like snakes and turtles, and some of the amphibians like frogs, and insects like butterflies and dragonflies, and fishes. You can see one fish that is Miss Kerala, that is associated with the Achingoville river basin. Next. Now, this is these riparian systems are under threat of landslides, invasion of alien species, timber extraction, sand mining, indiscriminate collection of non-wood forest products, development projects like hydroelectric projects, irrigation projects, and tourism projects, unscientific forestry operations like monoculture plantation development, and then pilgrimage, and also water contamination from various sources. Next. Now we look at the restoration aspects, and when it comes to riparian the river protection aspects, we generally follow these three. One is engineering technique like protection wall, making side walls. Now, if we make side walls along the whole river system, it may be something, it's not a river. And then there are also soft green engineering techniques like using geotextiles and reeds. So, but it can be restricted to areas where it is required. And then the final approach will be the restoration or revegetation approach. There, actually, what we have to do is the protection of the existing remnants. The remnants of such vegetations are well-formed remnants are found in along the river banks, and find out all those, and then give priority of protecting those remnants, and then go for revegetation or in the degraded stretches. Next one. So this is the river bank, riverfront project of Sabarmati River in Ahmedabad. Now, after this, many people are going, even in Kerala, there are attempts to make such approaches. So there may be one success story, but making of so many such river paths along so many rivers may make the rivers disappear. Next. And then I was talking about soft engineering measures, like you can use flare mat barriers, and then plan roll developments. That is for planting only, so it supports to a certain extent. Next. And then so this has to be done in a systematic manner. So in a phased manner you have to approach. And then first step is as shown, the width of the riparian belt has to be mapped with respect to rivers. So every again we have to have location specific, river specific, the river specific approaches. So there can be some generalization, but this has to be specific to particular area, particular stretch of the river. And then mapping all this in GIS format, there you have to take into account width of riparian belt, geomorphological features, characteristic species assemblage, and then existing coherent stretches and remnants. This, and then areas requiring or areas suitable to revegetation management next. And the step 2 is the design. There you can identification of appropriate species for planting in tune with specific landscape features. So then again, in all these, that is a stretch-wise approach or area-wise approach that we have to make specific designs. And third, collection and maintenance of propagules in nurseries. It may not be available in conventional nurseries, so you have to go make this for Pamba River Basin, and they have already made a nursery for this. And likewise, for each river, that has to be done. Then planting of seedlings in predetermined locations as per design. And then finally, post-planting monitoring care, including weed control. All these have to be done with the support of the community. So with perfect community participation, all the stakeholders have to be involved, and this has to go as a community program. Next. And then the target zones are upstream zone, forested upstream, that is the natural landscape. There you can concentrate only the fragmented or degraded areas because most of these are forested. And then a degraded midland, that is one of the critical zones. And coastal lowlands, again, including mangrove area. And then a fourth one, that is marshy areas associated with the river. Some with the river confluence, there is chance of forming some, marshy areas. There you can try freshwater Meristica swamp lake design. And then this is a typical design. And then there are three, this is zone-wise design. In the first zone, towards the waterfront, you plant only true riparian species and shrubs, which are adapted to this. And then in the middle zone, is towards the landward side, mix of true riparian and associate species. And interior side, you can have a mix of associate species and plants of utility value, like medicinal plants, and then wild fruits, and so many such species. Next. So there are good practices like which I already explained. You find out the existing strips which need to be protected, and then the gap areas have to be filled by planting. Yes. And then in planting considerations, again, you give only native and indigenous species which are adapted to riparian habitats. And the maximum diversity by planting species in all layers, which I was mentioning about the storage structure. So that again brings in the diversity aspect of it, and accord priority to endemic and rare category species that can have conservation also. Consider utilization potential of component species. So some of the species are medicinal plants or non-wood forest products. So give priority to such species. Reed bells are good for bank or gallery stabilization. So we can again use, like Oaklandra travancourica, it's a reed species with our geotextile. Use geotextiles where it is necessary. Not all along, this may not be required. And then planting in rows may be easier for access and maintenance. But random planting provides more natural appearance. So go for random planting. When it comes to design, these aspects need to be considered. And then regarding post-plant monitoring and care, so we have to see the seedling establishment and then recruitment of other species, because it's a contiguous system, and then species richness and diversity, and all these we can go for numerical values like quantitative assessment of diversity, richness, and so on. Then associate fauna, that also has to be taken. And then weed infestation. If there is weed infestation, then mechanical weed control measures may be adopted. And then see ecosystem services, like all these can be monitored regularly, and more importantly, carbon sequestration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Shaji. We'll have discussion after. Now I invite Dr. Unnikrishnan. He's a botanist basically, but he will be talking about avian flora and avian fauna. Okay.
Good evening to all. So my subject of discussion is birds as biological indicators of rivers. As we already discussed, river is a complex ecosystem. It is not just a place or canal for moving water, but it is a complex ecosystem. It consists of living and non-living components. Scientifically, it is abiotic and biotic components. For example, water, sand, clay, etc. We know that these are non-living or abiotic components. And when we consider the biotic components of the river, riparian floras, we have already discussed. Fishes are there, birds are there, insects are there, then other animals and microbes are there. And all these are interconnected. They are mutually dependent, and that forms the ecosystem. That is why we say that the system, this is a living system. Okay, next. So when we consider birds as biological indicator of the river system, so wetlands are very important habitats for the birds. About 125 wetland birds or wetland dependent birds were reported from the Vembanad wetlands. So Vembanad wetlands are nearby wetlands, and they are this wetland is also considered as a Ramsar site. There are 3 Ramsar sites in Kerala. So this Vembanad wetland is one among them, and the river Pamba drains to the Vembanad lake. So actually the river Pamba is part of the site, Ramsar site. You can consider like that. So there are 3 types of wetland birds. Pure wetland birds, they are known as the wetland birds, and there are birds which depend on wetlands for their food. And other birds are there. They may be land birds. They visit the wetlands or the river for their food. So wetland birds, example, they completely depend on wetlands or river. See, river is a wetland, as you know that it is a wetland. So so these pure wetland birds, they depend on the wetlands or river for their food, nesting, breeding, etc. So, for example, egrets. I will show you some photographs of these plants. You may not be familiar with these names. Darter, herons, storks. These are all kingfishers. You may be, you know, kingfisher, no? Kingfishers are there. All these are considered as wetland birds. Then some of the wetland dependent birds, example for, they indirectly depend on wetlands for their food and roost. Example, bee eaters. Then swallows, wagtails, drongo, starlings, eagles, eagles. Okay. Then other birds like dove or parakeets, bulbul, then birds named as orange-headed thrush, etc. They depend on the riparian vegetation or riverside vegetation for their food. They feed on the fruits of these trees. Okay, next. So birds are important link of food chain of river ecosystem, riverine ecosystem. For example, these birds, they feed on different types of fishes, then mollusk, frog, crab, snake, insects, and larvae, like that. So, for example, kingfishers feed on small fishes, little cormorant, another bird, and a darter, they feed on fishes underwater. They can go underwater and they collect their food from there, mainly fishes. Then egrets, they feed on frogs and worms, insects, and small fishes. Currents are there. They also feed on fishes. Then there is another, in some cases, there is specificity of food. For example, there is another a bird known as open-billed stork. It's a large bird. It feeds on a mollusk, which is known as spila. So then drongo and bee eaters feed on insects. Dove feeds on fruits of riparian plants, like that. Next. So a healthy river is a perfect ecosystem where ecosystem having all these components intact or balanced without any damage. So all these components are interconnected, as we already said. But all the rivers in Kerala, in India, and all over the world, they are under threat because of these type of activities. So sand mining is there, then dam construction is there, then destruction of riparian vegetation due to construction and other activities. Then a major problem is pollution. We know that different types of pollutions are there, chemicals are there, pesticides, insecticides, etc. are there. Plastic is a major pollutant, like that. So then changes in land use patterns, etc. disturb the entire ecosystem, disturb the system. So what happens? So when the system is disturbed, there may be depletion in the fish population, which is a major food for the birds. It may affect all other living beings like mollusks, crab, insects, etc., resulting reduction in the availability of food for the birds. So gradually, what happens? The bird population also get reduced. So several species of birds disappear. So this was experienced when we visited Pamba last time with your previous batch. We saw birds, but common birds were very, very less in number. We saw one or two birds in each species. Next. So reduction in the number and absence of common water birds is an indication of deterioration of the ecosystem or the river. So when river health get deteriorated or the ecosystem health get goes down, what happens? That may affect the number of birds visiting that particular wetland, that particular river, because there is non-availability of food due to these type of things, maybe because of pollution, because of other type of changes in the system. So birds are considered as very important biological indicators of the river health. Next. So I will show some of the wetland birds which are common in Kerala, and also these birds may be there in your places outside Kerala also it may be there. So if anyone is familiar with any of these birds, Please raise your hand. This is pond heron. It's a very common bird in Kerala. Next. These are known as the egrets. These are all different types of egrets. You can see some, yes, these are the different types of egrets. This is cattle egrets. So this is always, it goes along with cattle. That is why it is known as cattle egret. Then that is little egret. This is that actually that photograph is from Pamba only. Then this is intermediate egret, and that is large egret. It is larger than all these egrets. That is why. This is a heron known as purple heron. Next. This is the open bill stork. I told you that the food of open bill stork is that phyla. So that is a snail type organism. So it feeds on. And if you see the bills of that bill of that bird, no, it is somewhat separated. No, there is a gap. So that is to break this is hard-shelled snail. So that can be broken using that type of adjustment, that gap. So it kept the snail there and it breaks and eat the flesh out of it. This is known as darter. It is also known as snake bird. The neck, it is folded the neck. Now in this photograph, so it has got a very long neck. That is why it is known as the snake bird. So it can go inside, it can swim underwater and it collect fish from there. So these are also egrets are there, but at the center there is that bird is known as gray heron, and backside purple heron. These both are known as herons, coming under the group heron. Next. This is black-headed ibis. Black-headed ibis. This is a local migrant. This is glossy ibis. This is black in color. These are all local migrants and can be seen in other parts of India. It is there. This is a migrant in Kerala coming from the Europe. It is known as the cottontail. Usually you can see it in pairs. Next. These are very common. This is a very common bird that is little cormorant. It feeds on fish. Next. So these are 4 types of kingfishers can be seen in Kerala. White-throated kingfisher, pied kingfisher. Then this is a very small kingfisher, which is known as small blue kingfisher, and that is a large one known as the stout-billed kingfisher. This is white-breasted water hen. Then that is another migrant known as the wood sandpiper. The terns are also migratory birds. They visit Kerala during the winter season. It's a common bird known as the bronze-winged jacana. These are wetland-dependent birds. They are not true wetland birds. Blue-tailed bee-eater, then chestnut-headed bee-eater. So they feed on insects. This is a very small bird, plain prinia, known as plain prinia. So, okay. So this is all. These photographs taken last time when we visited Pamba, it's your previous batch. This is white-browed wagtail. This is a migrant. Next. This yellow wagtail is coming from Pakistan, and that side, these are migrants. Next. This is an eagle, a kite, known as the Brahminy kite. It is a very common kite. This also last time when we visited Attathod with your previous batch, took the photograph. It is a mountain hawk eagle. This is not a true riparian, but still it is in search of food from the river. Next. This is a brown fish owl. This owl feeds on fishes. Is a big, large bird. Can be seen in jungle areas only. This is not a wetland bird, but it feeds on this is the plant Melotus. This Melotus. sitting on, it is a riparian plant, and it feeds on the fruits of this. Next. Hey, anybody from North India, Northern Ganges? Somebody knows Ganges? Previous. These are gulls in Ganges. I got this photograph from Benares when I visited 4 years back. In September, October, these gulls are common in Ganges. Next. This is also from Northern India. Sardas cranes. Bharatpur, it is there. So these are the very, very big, tallest among the flying birds. This is not my photograph. Next. This photograph 4 years back I got from the Pangong Lake, Ladakh. There's a very beautiful wild duck known as the Brahminy duck or golden duck. It's a winter visitor, so it breeds there, Ladakh. Here it is not there in Kerala or in southern India, it is not there, but only in North India and especially in high altitude lakes. These strategies are showed the mud puddling of butterflies that slide. These butterflies, they consume mineral from the riverside, from the soil. This we can see for field visit. Next. So, day after tomorrow, I think we are going for a field visit. So we can see some of these birds there when we visit the field for our studies. So thank you for paying attention. I'll go on.
Thank you, Dr. Unnikrishnan. Now I invite Dr. Joby to talk about the vegetation analysis of riparian area.
Good evening. Thank you very much, sir. Actually, I am talking on especially riparian vegetation Pamba River that I have done my PhD work during 2007 to 2012. So how the riparian vegetation or riparian plants can be act as an indicator species to analyze the river system health. That is dealing with my presentation. Sorry for delay. Before going to my presentation, I want to read all this statement. That is, rivers and streams serve as a continent's circulatory system, and the study of those rivers, like the study of blood, can diagnose the health not only of the rivers themselves, but their landscapes. This is one of the famous quotation that may be the theme of our entire workshop. Okay. So I'm going to present riparian biodiversity for river health monitoring and restoration. So these are technical terms regarding the riparian vegetation. Actually, it is originated from the word ripa. That means bank of a river, pond or lake, or of the surrounding landscape. And this is these forests are also known as gallery forest or streamside forest. So this is a three-dimensional zone in which a terrestrial and aquatic interaction may be going on. So it has resource, energy, and material facts. So interaction between biological populations, biodiversity, refuge for rare and threatened species, pests and predators. And these zones are considered as ecotones. So many peculiarities of the riparian zones are given. Next slide. So this is a cross-sectional view of a typical riparian vegetation, in which riparian management zone, then channel migration zone, and especially subdivisions are given. Okay. Next slide. So the delineation of riparian vegetation seems to be a difficult task in Western Ghats rivers, because this is the eastern slope of Western Ghats, that is the Chinnar River, that is originated from the Idukki region and towards the Tamil Nadu. And we can see that this satellite imagery, we can easily identify the riparian vegetation from the surrounding vegetation. Next slide. But as the case of the Western Ghats rivers, especially in Pamba, we cannot identify the riparian zone or especially the riparian reaches from the vegetation, because in the upland regions of the vegetation, this is the region that we will be going to our field work, that is Atathod. And here it is, the riparian vegetation and the evergreen vegetation seems to be merged, and we cannot segregate the from the surrounding evergreen vegetation. Next slide. So a lot of interaction has been taking place in the riparian ecosystems. Next slide. It has its own components, both biotic and abiotic components. Then the riparian biodiversity, especially plants, animals, and microbes. For the riparian health assessment, it seems to be both three components may be assessed. So I'm going to deal with the plants, especially in angiosperms. Next slide. Before going to the further presentation, I want to show two research papers, especially the research paper published in River Yamuna, that is Madhavya Chauhan and Brij Gopal. Next slide. Then the riparian vegetation assessment of Kaveri River Basin of South India by C. Sunil et al. And next slide. So riparian plant diversity as a tool for river health monitoring and restoration. Take a study from Pamba River Basin, and this is the map of Pamba River Basin. The study has been conducted based on the elevation ranges, that is 1 to 7 meters as lowland, 8 to 70 meters as midland, 71 to 700 meters as highland, 701 to 1923 meters as high ranges. Next slide. We have sampled the vegetation in qualitative and quantitative methods, that is quarter and transit method, and the species area curve method is used for quantifying. Next slide. Along with the riparian vegetation, we have analyzed the disturbance based on the perceived effect on the vegetation or the river health, that is disturbance type that are identified as sand mining, embankment, cultivation, weed infestation, vegetation clearing, etc. And the perceived effect of that that kind of impact has been given rank, and dams are given the highest rank. The disturbance level was calculated. Next slide. These are the natural riparian vegetation in the upland, midland, lowland regions of the Pamba River Basin. Next slide. This is the vegetation profile, a cross-section profile of the riparian vegetation in the River region of Midland. Okay, next slide. So here is it is the data. There are 579 species of riparian plants are identified from the region. It includes angiosperms, gymnosperms, and pteridophytes. Next slide. Then it has endemism 20.80% of endemism, and the largest number of endemism shown by endemic to southern Western Ghats species. That is, 57 species are endemic to southern Western Ghats. Next slide. This is the we have mapped the endemism and RETs, ret species in the riparian stretches, and based on the distribution, we have high percentage of RETs species distribution as indicated by dark red dots. Next slide. Then red listed species are here. 32 species are identified from the study area. Then it is also distribution endemic species is included. Then the alien endemic species of Pykara River Basin also calculated. Next slide. It is also mapped. Then functional vegetation types are identified. That is, there are 4 type of functional vegetation type that is based on the flood reaction towards the flood or inundation. That is avoider, endurer, invader, and resistor categories. Next slide. And invader species are produces large number of pigments. Usually they are invasive species. Then endurer species are reed sprouts after the flood or any kind of disturbances. Then resistor species are usually trees. They can withstand the large floods. Then avoider species are some annual species that can be reed sprout or during the disturbance time, they may be the plants may be at the stage of propagule. Next slide. So disturbances are also mapped, and we have found that the lower region, lowland region and midland region seems to be highly disturbed, and also the upper reaches, because the upper reaches has 3 major dams are there. So it seems that the dams creating a lot of disturbance, and it has high disturbance rank. So the upper and lower stretches are seems to be highly disturbed in the Pamba region, but in the midland region, especially the Attadod region and also in the Sabarimal region, there is Periyar Tiger Reserve is there, also wildlife sanctuary is there. So it seems to be more pristine in nature. So this kind of data, how can this data can be used before river health assessment and restoration? I have a present just a model. Next slide. So indicator species is an organism whose presence, absence, or abundance reflects a specific environmental condition. So it can be used as a proxy for to diagnose the health of an ecosystem. Next slide. So we identified different stand types in lowland, midland, highland, and high range region. In lowland region, open nuclear missionaries, that is I-20, Ficus spida, Neolamarki Kadamba type vegetation stand is identified. So in midland, highland, and high range regions are corresponding indicator species. All these are indicator species. So few photographs of the indicator species. This is Actinophaga vaitiana, Aringa vaiti. Next slide. Then Pullinia exarlata, Esopharia. All these are typical evergreen forest components, but they are also found in the riparian zones. Next slide. Then Symbolochus cochingiensis, this is also evergreen species. Then Bacuria cortalensis is also a semi-evergreen type of species. Then this is a typical riparian species, Rativa magna. It is actually in Malayalam near Madalam. Actually, the near means related to water, and we can also identify the typical riparian species based on the local names. That is, the vernacular names may be dealing with the water near near Madalam. Okay, next slide. Then Eugenia muniana, this is a shrub. Garcinia vaiti. Next slide. Homonia riparia. This is actually a typical riparian species. It's a shrub. Its species name itself riparia. Next slide. Then Hopia punga. Then next slide. Humboldt Wagriana. We have seen about 144 individuals in a single stretch of 1 kilometer. Humboldt Wagriana in the upper region of Pambar River Basin. Next slide. Nophopetalum haitianum. Maduka nerifolia. This is also a typical riparian species, indicator species. Ocranuclear missionis. This is known as A2NG, in which R means river. A2NG. Next slide. Cyclotria flavida. Next slide. Rotula aquatica. Next slide. Syzygium oxidande. Tarina monosperma. Vitis leucocylo. This is also known as A2NG, which is R means water, river. Next slide. Barringtonia racemosa. Next slide. Neolaga Lamarca cadamba. Next slide. So besides the indicator species that we have identified, there is also a different type of invasive species or weed species. This is Acacia pendata, Ageratum, then Promelina odorata, then Kabambo. All these are invasive species. Next slide. Icornic Asipus, Pistia, Lantana. So many invasive species are identified from this region. Next slide. So for my suggestion, the river assessment protocol, we have to select the site, collect GPS location, then probably 500 to 1000 meters of a stretch can be selected for the analysis. We can collect the presence or absence data of indicator species, alien and endemic species, RET species, functional vegetation, disturbance indicators. And this cumulative data can be used for analyzing or assessing or creating a river health index. Next slide. This is a sample data sheet, and we can fill the data. For example, indicator species 1, if it is present, we can give a Y value, then a number of individuals can be counted, and we have to give a weightage to the indicator species that corresponding role that done by the species. So we can multiply number of individuals into weightage that can be the indicator value can be given. So a total value. Then also alien and endemic species, we can give presence and absence data. Number of individuals can be counted and weightage will be given. And alien species may be sometimes it may be a negative indicator for the ecosystem. So the weightage may be given in negative values. Next slide. RET species also, we can give weightages and presence absence data, also the number of individuals, then functional vegetation types, and also disturbance analysis. So from this kind of data collection, we can the cumulative data of this collected data can be converted into an health index. Besides the vegetation data, the faunal data, especially I mean microbes, then fish data, then birds data, dragonflies and damselflies data can be utilized for the complete analysis of the river health. These are the disturbances that I have noted from the Pambar River Basin. So there are so many methods or ideas published in the internet. This is a visual evaluation assessment of riparian health. Next slide. Good practice rehabilitation activities are there. Then this is as per the Pambar River Basin, we have suggested a riparian buffer system in which there are 4 zones are identified, and the zone 1 with immediate to the water body, that is mixed plants with the plants layer can be utilized. Then zone 2nd, tree layer, then shrub layer and grass layer for a riparian buffer system. Next slide. So from the study, we have identified typical riparian trees that can be utilized for the riparian restoration, that is natural or endemic species of nuclear missionis, Humboldt, Waglia, Neola, Kadamba, Maduka nidifolia, Hopia funga, Vitex lucasella, Veteri indica, etc. Then a shrub layer can be Ficus Latrophila, Harmonia riparia that can be utilized. Then the grass layer, Saccharus spontaneum, Octonucleum, Oclantus victoria, that are some of the grass species. So this kind of a comprehensive account, besides the floral data, the faunal data can be also can be collected, that can be utilized for assessing the river health. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John, Ravi. Now we have the last talk online in this session by Dr. Hariharan. He will be talking about the lichens as indicators of river health. I welcome Dr. Hariharan online.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. I will quickly share my screen and give me a minute. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. See, I'm going to take a deviation. I'm not going to speak just lichens as indicators of ecosystem health. This is just to say how much this epiphytic diversity is important, especially conserving the entire epiphytes and their ecosystems as safeguards against climate change. And the rain-fed riverheads and their role in really, playing a critical role in water cycle, and how that is also affecting the hilltop plantations. So these two are combined together and in this presentation. See, when it comes to microclimate regimes to moderate the ill effects of climate change, in the forest ecosystems, if we really see the microclimate, the climate of a small area that is different from the area around it, maybe warmer or colder, wetter or drier, depending upon the valley or whatever it is, may play a moderating effect with respect to the climate change. It may, if it is very dry, then the epiphytic diversity increase the relative humidity, or if it is completely wet, they hold the water and release it slowly. Particularly in topographically complex areas such as the mountains, you have undulating plateaus and so on. Various vegetation types are there. Protecting the components of the components that maintain microclimate is very, very essential. From the Kerala, you can see a lot more with respect to how these components vary from one location to the other. And to save, basically when we safeguard this, we are safeguarding the life supporting system from the ill effects of climate change. So epiphytic biomass, if we really look at, the tree canopies are known as the seventh planet. We have not discovered as many organisms as possible. So they are known as the seventh, they are very rich in biodiversity. And in terms of biomass, they also have a very huge biomass accumulation over the canopies, and the major components of the tropical montane cloud forest. In the international language, they classify the forests which really capture the mountain clouds and bring in rain as tropical montane cloud forests. And these forests are the head of the rain-fed rivers. In the peninsular India itself, in the morning I mentioned about the various rivers. Around 79 rivers originate in the peninsular India. Some of them are seasonal, some of them are perennial, which are very vital for the local economics and development. These forests, their epiphytic community, are high on the list of world's most threatened ecosystems. You know, when we go into these kind of forests, many of us will admire the beauty from the lower levels, from the ground level, but the canopy is a complete different ecosystems, and that is one of the world's most threatened ecosystem. These forest areas are subjected to high pressure for forest resources. We are all aware how the Amazon forest is facing a threat and how much every day we are losing such forests all across the globe, irrespective whether it is Malaysia or any other location in the world where these forests dominate. For example, in these hills, lichens and bryophytes are extensively extracted as non-timber forest produce by the tribal people, and also sold them to earn their livelihoods. So epi means over or on, phytic means on trees. So mostly the diversity of lichens and bryophytes and other organisms which colonize the treetops. This is a beautiful photograph taken in the Sirwane Hills. And when you see, when a cloud is moving ahead like this, epiphytes are the major components of the tropical mountain forests, and they are poikilohydric in nature, in the sense their body serve as a organ to extract water from the atmosphere. They don't have any root system. So these organisms also don't have any control mechanisms to hold the water within. So they are known as poikilohydric organisms. And especially in the hilltop forest, if we really look at, this is a paper after Gentry and Dodson. In the dry areas, if you really look at, the epiphytic load is very low compared to the wet forest. The epiphytes, especially lichen and bryophytes, are one of the dominant factors. Large percentage of species of epiphytes in the wet forest compared to the dry forest. With our study also, we have come across similar situation. How they really work. Epiphytes capture, retain, and slowly release the water. That's the reason you get water supply all through the year. Between two rain events, if we take the augment water supply to small streams and make the river perennial. In the canopy, they can hydrate up to 4 to 5 times their dry weight. If it is 10 kg, then up to another 5 times. They can capture water. So they retain it for some time, like a capacitor in the fan. They quickly get the current, and as a surge, they will release it. That's the reason the fans go faster. So similarly here also, after capturing, they retain and they slowly release the water to the stream drip after the drip. So almost equivalent to the capacitor to regulate the seasonal precipitation. Every day there may not be a rain on the top, but still our rivers supply water regularly. So this is the main component which gives the supply. Elevate the canopy moisture level. You know, it's when we put a blotting paper with little bit of moisture, the entire area will get moist. So similarly, the epiphytic biomass act as a sink. They get the water and slowly increase the canopy moisturization level. Canopy moisture levels are very important to attract the rain clouds. So this is a vicious cycle. So loss of water by evapotranspiration and drainage is rather slow, maintaining the discharge between 2 storm events very regular, so that your rivers will get wonderful water all through the day or all through the season. On the left side, if you really look at what kind of a lichen diversity that colonize the canopy. It's the thallus is highly finely divided body. It's an adaptation to withstand high wind velocity, especially on the canopy, high wind velocity and inundation of water from clouds. Like a very thin strand, when the clouds pass through, they capture water, hanging downwards due to the consistent dripping of the captured water. So what is the statistics? The fog liquid water content these epiphytes capture to the point of 10.3 to 69.5 mg per meter cube per second. Then you can imagine in an hour how much they are capable of capturing it. We will move to the next slide. This is my own example from the Western Ghats. You see, after capturing the whole thing, you see how much this kind of a dripping is happening. So this will happen all through the day, and that's the reason the streams also get the water supply without any interruption. Water capture, retention, and slow dripping of water is very, very essential to make our streams perennial all through the year. Now, let me come to the very important point. In the name of non-forest timber produce, especially lichen diversity, because we all love biryani, this is one of the key component. Once we add to our food, it gives a wonderful flavor. And it also gives the tribal people to earn their livelihood by collection and sale of these NTFP. But unfortunately, the growth rate of these lichens are very, very slow. We call it as replenishment rates because initially they collect and they have to grow again and replenish the whole area. The growth rate is around 1 to 2 millimeter per year in nature. Hence, lichen harvest rate exceeds the replenishment rate by the regrowth of lichens, resulting in extensive damage to the fragile epiphytic lichen community that is colonizing the treetops. Here is an example from the Tandikudi region of Dindigul district, part of Western Ghats. A week's collection. The whole weight may be around 10 kg, but to extract that, they would have destroyed the epiphytic community of nearly 1 kilometer square or what. So that is the kind of a damage this this is happening, and that's the reason in our laboratory at MS Swaminathan Foundation we established the cultures of these lichens to synthesize the same compound. So it is like having the cake and eat it too. We can give the livelihood support to these people by just culturing this lichen and getting the compound to which can give us the same food flavor. So that is one viable example how we can safeguard the rainforest, at the same time safeguard the livelihoods of these people as well. So loss of epiphytes, what is going to happen? The current rate of epiphytic extraction is unsustainable and will lead to permanent loss of many lichen species. In the same heap, one can easily identify more than 100 different lichen species, which are known as foliose lichens. So very simpler communities, they impoverishes the biodiversity greatly, leading to the formation of simpler, less species rich, less complex biological communities on the treetops, might take the habitat less resilient in the face of climate change. A single species trying to combat the ill effects of climate change vis-a-vis a unique ecosystem is trying to face the music. That is what is going to be the challenge. And everybody will agree with me that there is a biodiversity conservation beyond tiger and elephant. And this is the time in our country, we need to flag that very high to the Ministry of Environment and Forest and other officials so that they give more attention to the neglected biodiversity components like microbial diversity, lichen diversity, actinomycetes and others who are playing a silent role and making our life wonderful to stay on. So what is the whole thing? Conserve the rain-fed rivers. The rain-fed rivers are the key for getting our water supply in the peninsular India. They are all mainly rain-fed rivers. You have two types of rivers in the world. One is snow-fed rivers and the another one is the rain-fed rivers. During summer, their flow is greatly reduced and some of the tributaries even dry up, only to be revived in the monsoon. This is a photograph of River Kaveri in the Tiruchi area. In the Western Ghats alone, there are about 43 different rivers that originate. And in the Eastern Ghats, there are about 36 rivers. That is what, as a cumulative number, I mentioned it earlier. Now, you look at the hilltops, they are also home for the coffee plantation. And they also closely align with the biodiversity hotspots. They also serve as the head of watersheds. So overlap between key coffee growing regions and the 34 biodiversity hotspots. You know, Professor always used to say, think globally, act locally, where the biological diversity is richest and the most threatened. I can show you very many slides in this to explain this phenomenon. Key habitat for several organisms. It is not just for lichens. Right from lichen colonizing mite onwards, we can still go on and need to document many of the, or even discover many new species. So there is a strong need for coffee to conserve the epiphytes as well. You look at what is happening in our coffee estates. Mature trees are systematically killed to gain more sunlight, to promote Robusta cultivation. This action jeopardizes the soil conservation and promotes erosion in the fragile ecosystem. It is a jeopardizing activity against biodiversity conservation. Increased temperature and less humidity equal to sun-grown coffee, unfortunately. So when it comes to climate change and coffee plantation and safeguarding our rivers, with global warming, coffee plantation might need to be shifted to higher altitudes. This means loss of rich biodiversity in such altitudes and resource poor coffee cultivators abandoning coffee plantation. Why I brought this slide here is because the Wayanad region of Kerala, this is what is going to be the problem in the years to come. Coffee production may become economically unviable by 2020. That's what many of the reports say. And now we feel there is a decline in the yield as well, based on the case study by Gay et al. Increase in the pest attack, and there is a possibility of new pests emerging. So what is the way ahead? Effective conservation of tropical montane cloud forests, understanding the physical and biological threats to this forest and developing site-specific remedies. It is not one shoe fit all. We have to have very highly site-specific remedies, especially when it is a complex system, including the livelihoods of the people. We need to have alternatives so that they can also live comfortably and the ecosystem can also safeguard it. The status of epiphytes as ecosystem components, assessing their vulnerability and resilience to human activities or climatic drying. These need to be studied from our own ecosystems. Developing strategies for managing existing as well as degraded these kind of forests with specific focus on sustaining yields for specific products like NTFP and the welfare of the associated people. Strategies for restoring this forest under different environmental conditions and for different degrees of degradation. We cannot, even if it is a small patch of forest of tropical mountain climate, cloud forest, we cannot allow it to decay. Such decays will make the islands within the ecosystem, and thereafter their resilience capability will go down. So even if it is a small patch, we need to, Foundation is a pioneering organization where we have restored many of the wonderful ecosystems. So similarly, the tropical mountain cloud forest also need to be restored to its full potential so that forever we will receive water supply. Creating the environmental, socio-economic, and institutional conditions needed for successful protection, management, and restoration of these forests. I thank you for this wonderful opportunity and share some of our work with you. Thank you very much. And I'm ready to take questions.
Thank you, Dr. Hariharan, for a very informative talk on less known aspects of the river conservation as well as climate change. Now the floor is open. I request you to stay for some few minutes for an interaction. Now the floor is open for discussion. I request you may ask questions to Hariharan first. We move on to other people.
Hello, sir. Do you suggest some activities to control the invasive species from the rivers? Because in your slides also we saw a lot of invasive species.
Your voice is not clear.
there is another class.
Yeah, you speak like this. If you take your mic very
Species.
close to the mouth, then it is shattering.
Yeah, his question is about the invasive species. I think tomorrow there is a separate class on Sajiv on the invasive species, and he will handle that. So, any other questions? You may ask.
Yeah. Hello, sir. My question is about related to degradation of riparian zones. As we see that the development has encroached the zone and there's a loss of riparian zone. So how to restore it back and the biodiversity or the ecosystem that was there in the riparian zone, how to get back to the same stage?
Thank you. This is a very important dimension. Development vis-a-vis conservation. So from that perspective, we really look at, we also know where, with modern sophisticated remote sensing technologies, we also know what is the extent of area of these tropical montane cloud forests. Easy to map, even when it is with human dwellings and so on. And the immediate answer is to restore these areas with native species, especially native tree species and so on. And if we can identify those parts and allow them to regenerate, our efforts also need to be there at the same time. If we are not disturbing any system for nearly 15 to 20 years, the natural regeneration also will help. And this is very important to really restore the river heads at the top, because they are the ones which are going to get the supply from the passing clouds and going to make these rivers perennial. If we damage it, then the damage is going to be irreversible and the next few generations will face the music. So this is the time where we have to act. We need to employ wonderful tools that is available with us, and combination of natural species, we must be able to do the job.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Sudeep this side. Thanks for highlighting the importance of lichens biodiversity and their importance. I wish to know that what are the method or models that are available to estimate the biodiversity of lichen community in a particular place?
Yeah, this is another interesting dimension. See, many of the international studies, when it comes to measuring the biodiversity, they use a lot of methodologies. One is use these kind of organisms, like whether it is lichens or bryophytes, as a surrogate species to understand what is going to be the total diversity of the region and so on. There are both numerical estimations as well as, true to type. We collect the species, identify it and give the name, and then tell you what is the diversity that is present over there. There are a lot of taxonomic literature available for the identification of lichens, many of the lichen species which is available in the Western Ghats. So that is not a problem. And through quantitative ecological methods, we can also opt for estimating the total number of lichen diversity present in a particular ecosystem.
So any definite index or something it has been developed for the same?
Long back with Professor Gadgil, we developed a software to identify the lichens. It is known as Lifkey lichens. It need to be refurbished. That is the one software we developed. But especially with younger students, we can really encourage them to look at the wonderful stages of lichen development, which are critical for lichen identification, because lichens are all fungi and ascomycetes in nature. So the student must be able to see the ascospores, how they germinate, how they come in contact with the algal partner, and how they colonize, and how a thallus is formed. These are all wonderful world. It's a wonderful world, altogether. So unless and otherwise, we are very strong in that. Application of numerical taxonomy or numerical methods will only give you a number. 48 lichens are there, 58 lichens are, but that means nothing. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. My other question to the other panelists, that like one of panelists there suggested about the constructed wetland and other things, the same way we can give a value for their role for capturing the carbon sequestration. The same time they are emitting the greenhouse gases like methane emission. So if suppose as a solution we are constructing wetland somewhere else, so what could be the possible measures or mechanisms we can take care so that we can control the emission of these kind of greenhouse gases or mitigate it?
This question is not for me now.
Oh, this.
Any other questions to Dr. Hari?
No, I can give him a solution.
Oh, yeah.
See, the point is, nature is a wonderful system. It has both checks and balances. It becomes a problem once we start meddling with it or interfering with the whole system per se. The same water pond ecosystem, if you really look at, the plants which are there, like Vallisneria or so many aquatic plants, will do very good photosynthesis in the morning and enrich the water with oxygen. And the same species will remove that oxygen in the night and enrich it with carbon dioxide. If we allow certain levels of, this kind of a species diversity of aquatic plants to sit in the system without any disturbance, then there is no possibility of even formation of methane and other gases, because in an aerobic situation, methane production is going to be very unlikely. Unfortunately, when we completely make the water eutrophic, give all kind of nitrogen and other supplies into it, make the blue-green algae to take over, and completely make it as an anaerobic system. After that, for methanogens or methanogenic bacteria, that will be very easy to generate the methane levels and contribute to this kind of release of greenhouse gases and so on. So that is where we need to, even when they create an artificial wetland, these are all the plant species and the animal species which are going to maintain the balance. If we forget that and if we try to engineer something else, we are doomed.
Thank you.
Using for purification of water in Cochin, there are plants like that. In some companies, they are doing it. So aquatic macrophytes like Canna, Canna, then Pistia, so many plants are there. So these plants can be used for purification of water. Okay.
Thanks so much.
Thank you all for your very interesting presentations. Dr. Haran, I've learned a new word. I'm not being Indian, I guess I never heard of lichens before. So thanks for introducing me to that. My questions, I have a few that are a bit related to the last question about methodology and measurements. First of all, there was talk about, I'll ask them all at once and then whoever wants to answer. So there was the value given to certain vegetation, a value, and I wanted to know how you came up with that value given to this specific vegetation. Then also about, again, vegetation and also with the birds. I imagine you sample a certain area, you collect data from a certain area in time and space, and then you generalize that or you make predictions based on that. But especially now, say with the birds, we know that the movement, so if it's migration from migratory birds, it changes. So you might go one day and you might see 4 birds. You go another day and you see 100 birds. So how do you really validate what you see that is not just based on the day you went, and also with the vegetation in the place that you went. Say I think I saw numbers like 500 and 1,000. I didn't get the measurement, but you sample this particular area and you find 4 of a certain plant. Oh, the word was weightage. I wanted to ask for my first question, weightage. So you find 4 of them and you give them a certain weight. But in another area, you might find none, or you might find 20 in another area. So I guess what I'm trying to ask is, how do you accommodate for the time and space aspect, and then also the weightage? Thank you.
Thank you, Mom. Your nice question. Actually, the weightage that has been given to the indicator species or invasive species or anything like that, based on the ecosystem service that has provided the particular species, especially in tree species provide in riparian area as a lot of role, especially the riparian tree species can be regarded as a keystone species because it many animals depends on that species. It also protects the river banks and also probably the water, maintaining the water quality. So such a kind of effect of species on that ecosystem can be given as weightage. So that's why I just indicated the weightage for particular species, that is indicator species 1, species 2, and species 3. This is a hypothetical condition. Maybe we can develop a more precise tool for assigning the indicator values of particular species. Okay, this is just a model. Thank you.
And regarding the birds count and all that, that is to be done by volunteering the local people also, so that we will get data from the source. So that is what we are doing. Yes.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Okay. Regarding the vegetation analysis, we have to usually we can adopt the transect method or quadrant method. Quadrant method for especially I have done the tree species analysis in 10 into 10 meter square plots. For herbs and shrubs, we have 5 into 5 meters spotted, and for herbaceous members, 1 into 1 meter square plots are used. So using such standards, we can assume or indicate the values or weightage can be given. From the bank of the river towards the surrounding area.
Question. There was one slide with that Narega work, and you mentioned that that was destructive in some way. Can you just explain that a little bit, please? What were they doing? They were clearing some foliage which was necessary. That
which
Employment Guarantee Act work, sir. There was one slide which you said.
Yeah. Actually, they are completely removing the entire vegetation because they want to free flow of water. That is what. But our local people, these panchayat members and all they want is they need water to be flow directly. They want to see the water. Actually, when we approach the panchayat or people, what they are saying is that we need concrete bunding for the streams so that there is no disturbance. So you can see in the even in our PWD roadsides also, you can see nowadays U-shaped concrete structures are kept so that there is no water percolation. So all this. Yeah. So there is no water harvesting in that is as Dr. James said, there is a flash flood occurs in the urban areas. The main reason is that there is no water going underground because concrete structures they are keeping all the way. So what they are saying is that the people will put plastic and something in the drains so that it will wash out easily. Otherwise, it will create some problem. So that is the reason for the irrigation or PWD people. But we have to understand that for recharge our rivers or streams, we need to conserve water underground. That is important. Yes. Restrictions.
I have a few questions, sir. I'll just ask them out all together. Like the first question was, what aspect of the river flow itself is important for riparian vegetation? Like the flow regime, or what about the river is important to keep the riparian vegetation healthy? Was one question. Second is, I think, Dr. Unikrishnan, you mentioned that dams cause disturbances to riparian vegetation, right? I was wondering what kind, how. But to the riparian zone specifically, I would like to know. What about the flow of a river might cause problem to the riparian zone? Or for example, I'm looking in this Moya River in Western Ghats. So there is riparian vegetation at some reaches and it's not there in some reaches. And these riparian trees, which consist of the Arjuna tree, is very important for the vultures. So I want to know what aspect of the river can be shown as very important to maintain these trees and so maintain the vegetation, maintain the life that depends on these riparian zones. So that's one question. The second question was about indicators itself. I've heard when I talk that some species can be generalist species. They can adapt with disturbance also, while as some species are very specialist species and so maybe they should be chosen as indicators. Is there something like that? When you choose indicators, would you choose species that are very sensitive to disturbance? Was the next one.
Okay. The first question was regarding the dams, isn't it? So when you create a dam, so you are creating a stagnant water pool in the upstream. So that disturbs without flow, and that affects the riparian system. You can see in any of the dams. Particularly, it is very significant in Kerala. In many areas, we have seen the riparian species disappear. Instead, some other species colonize in the area, and then downstream there is less flow, and that also affects the riparian vegetation. And regarding sensitive species, this is something different. No, the species I was referring to species adapted to or evolved in that particular amphibious habitats. So I also shown some of which they are true riparians. Now those true riparians can be taken as indicator species.
Thank you. Just one more question. When communities, it was mentioned that communities must be involved to take care of the rivers or trying to restore them. But are communities truly stakeholders of rivers itself is sometimes a question. Like in the Moya River, which I am hoping to study, most of it has now come under protected areas, and then the tribal population living along them are not even allowed to go fish anymore and things like that. So I was just wondering, how can community involvement be brought in when communities themselves are separated from these kind of ecosystems nowadays? They're not really anymore linked with these systems, right?
That's where we need more awareness regarding the other ecological factors of river. That we need to be sensitized the people community why we have to keep the rivers healthy, not only for their livelihood, for other ecological reasons also. So shall we conclude? If no more questions, we have one more session, I think, in the. Yeah. Okay, then thank you very much for the participation of all panelists, Dr. Joby, Dr. Unikrishnan, Shaji, and Dr. Hariharan. Thank you, Dr. Hariharan. And thank you, MSRF, for the nice arrangements and all. Everything has been gone well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, thank you. So, we'll be having 2 days field trip along Pampa River Basin. So, experts will be with us.